Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Destiny Pharma PLC full year results investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged and can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab. It's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please simply type in your questions at any time and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it's appropriate to do so. These will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard, and we will notify you by email when these are ready for your review. Before we begin, I would like to submit the following poll, and if you'd give that your kind attention, I'm sure the company would be most grateful. And I'd now like to hand you over to CEO Neil Clark and CFO Sean Claydon. Good morning.
Good morning, thank you, and welcome to everybody who's joining this presentation, which obviously is our 2021 financial results and an update on year to date. So just moving through the slides, obviously I hope most of you are familiar with Destiny and our goal, which is to develop novel medicines preventing serious infections. So we're the infection prevention company, and had a very successful 2021 and looking forward to an exciting 22 and beyond. And just introducing ourselves, so obviously Neil Clark, CEO, been in the sector since the late 1990s and been with Destiny since early 2017. Also joined today by Sean, our CFO. Any comments, Sean?
I joined Destiny just over 3 years ago. Come from a background of corporate finance initially, working in the city before becoming CFO of a number of biotech and also med device companies.
Okay, that's great. And just in terms of our management team, just to note that you'll see there's a space here. We've had Peter Morgan has stepped down, retired as a non-exec after many years. We will be appointing a new non-exec in the near future. And also, as we previously announced, we have a new Chief Medical Officer joining us. That will now be in early May, and we'll announce details as that person starts. But strong team and getting even stronger with those new additions. But really, regarding the company, those who've heard the presentations before, we're consistent in our story, the focus on infection prevention, but very exciting that we have two novel assets, late stage. They're both completed phase 2s, heading towards phase 3s, which is the end game of clinical development and targeting significant opportunities where there's a clinical need, but also, we think very clear commercial opportunities, which of course is, the key driver of the valuation, the ultimate success of these as products in the market. And we've had a good track record since the IPO. Yes, we've been slower in places, and obviously, the recent funding was not, done at a pretty grisly share price, but we're in a decent funding position. We're continuing to attract shareholder support and looking to move forward, and we believe we can deliver on the milestones that we set out, that we will get better recognition of the inherent value in our pipeline. And a key part of that, of course, is partnering. We're an R&D company. We need to find partners for the late stage programs, especially M3, our C. difficile asset. But we're virtual, a lean model, so the majority of the cash, as Sean will tell you, goes on R&D, and we are building a very valuable pipeline. We have some earlier assets as well, which are well positioned. And the backdrop to what Destiny is doing, as you may have heard before on our presentations, the area of infection prevention, infection treatment has been neglected for decades. And the world's learning the hard way that this has been a mistake. Superbugs, which are resistant to old antibiotics, are increasing in their numbers. This means if you have an infection caused by a superbug, it can't be treated. You can't kill the infection, stop the infection, and this can be very dangerous. Destiny Pharma's XF platform has been developed in the past 10, 15 years with a key attribute that it doesn't generate resistance, doesn't create superbugs, which gives us a clear therapeutic window and an advantage, we believe, from the XF platform. So we're addressing this global problem of antimicrobial resistance. But of course, in the last 2 or 3 years, we've learned, of course, the terrible coronavirus, COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, that's a viral infection, but the read across from the problems caused by that infection, individual, personal, family health, and of course, associated costs, be it hospital costs or broader economic costs, have highlighted clearly the importance of being able to prevent, treat infections in a much better way with modern medicine, modern science. And companies like Destiny Pharma, biotechs especially, are at the forefront of bringing forward new technologies. So this is sort of some of the backdrop to what we're looking to do. But we also like to say that our products stand alone. They have clear advantages to existing treatments. So therefore, if you just look at them as good products, perhaps hospital products, which is the majority of our products are targeted at hospital use, they will add to improvements to personal individual healthcare, but also save hospitals money by stopping infections. As we said, 2 late-stage assets, one of which is targeting prevention of hospital infections caused by Staphylococcus aureus. And as I talked to you today from FinCap near Smithfield, looking across out of side of the window at Bart's Hospital, I always like to say that probably at this moment somebody in there is being swabbed in their nose to see if they're a carrier of Staph aureus before they're going for an operation. If they are a carrier in the nose, they should be decolonized. The idea is that you kill the bacteria in the nose before the operation to reduce the risk of that bacteria jumping from the nose into the sort of surgical wound, as it were, as the surgeon operates. So that's a clear clinical need and a great asset. And then we also have M3, which is a totally different technology, which is looking to prevent the recurrence of a nasty gut infection caused by a bacteria called Clostridioides difficile. So late-stage assets, as we said, both completed phase 2, both heading towards phase 3s. And the early pipeline, we have a COVID-19 program in partnership with Sporgen, and now 2 dermal programs running with XF73 from our XF platform. And the balance sheet, thanks to the recent funding, is strengthened, and we're in a good position as we head forward for the next 12 months. And this is the pipeline. In orange, you will see what our assets, Sporkov, our COVID-19 program, which is the earlier program at the bottom, and then also M3, which is our most advanced program targeting Clostridioides difficile infection recurrence. These assets are both harnessing elements of the human microbiome. They're based on biotherapeutics, on bacterial formulations, or with M3, a single bacterial spore. And this is in sort of a very interesting area, which is fast developing. It was the human microbiome, considered, as it were, the new organ. If we can harness the benefits of the microbiome, the human microbiome, then we can create new medicines and better treatments. So Destiny Pharma is playing in this space, which is very exciting. Building on what was really at the IPO, our core strength, of course, which was the XF platform, and our lead program there, XF73 nasal, which delivered fantastic phase 2 data last year, but also we have some earlier programs. So a really well-formed pipeline, which we've shown we can expand since the IPO. I'm sure we can do more in the future, but the focus very much, of course, in the next 12 months is delivery from those two lead programs, M3 and XF73 nasal. They're both targeting important markets, as I've said. In the case of M3, there are 500,000 cases of CDI, Clostridioides difficile infection in the US annually, and reported 29,000 deaths, which is a similar rate to prostate cancer. So this is a nasty gut infection, which can lead to serious infection and death. So, of course, the associated healthcare burden and indeed treatment cost is significant, and we believe that M3 has the potential to prevent the recurrence of these infections. So the problem with C. difficile is you have high levels of recurrence. You can knock back the initial infection reasonably well with cheap antibiotics, but you get these relatively high recurrence rates. And M3 looks to stop that. And if we can price this sensibly, which we believe we can, because we'll have a good cost of goods, we can really reduce the healthcare costs of managing this infection. But of course, patients will be healthier. There will be less deaths due to the prevention of the recurrence. And then XF73, similarly, infection prevention. The costs associated with that are reasonably well established in terms of if you have an infection, you stay in hospital longer, you have to have more treatments. If you had say an infection after a hip replacement, you can imagine in some cases the hip replacement may have to come out. And, it's very difficult then to have a second hip replacement. So the costs when these infections recur after surgeries are significant. And of course, the personal healthcare discomfort damage is significant. So clear clinical need and clear commercial opportunities. And in the phase 3 studies, we'll be looking to capture data that supports these claims, of course, of reducing the cost through less days in hospitals. So really clear programs, clear clinical need, and we have 2 very exciting novel assets targeting these 2 infections. And again, in both cases, looking for infection prevention. And important to note, they're totally different technologies. XF73 is classical organic chemistry. M3 is actually a naturally recurring strain of Clostridioides difficile. So really diversifying the risk in our pipeline Both assets are advanced and heading towards phase 3 studies. There's a slide here, just won't look back too much, but we've got a good track record since the IPO of delivery, expanding the pipeline in 2020 by bringing in M3. But obviously, as we look forward, what we need to do, as we've said publicly, is to find a partner for M3 initially, which is our sort of most advanced asset. We're looking to do that this year and get that study started. We're also in the process of finalising the XF73 study designs, both with US and EU regulators, so we have clarity on where that's going. The cost and size of that XF73 phase 3 is important, and we're in the process of finalising that. And we're also bringing forward the earlier programs this year. And then next year, we want to have, obviously, M3 actively recruiting patients, but also XF73 catching up, partnering that asset, and starting that phase 3 towards the end of that year. So really ending 2023 with 2 very active phase 3 programs with partners and a buoyant earlier pipeline. A fantastic position for a biotech to be in, and it's in our sights, in our target, and the strategy is very clear. The board's very clear. Hopefully, existing investors are clear on what we're trying to do, and we believe if we can deliver some of these milestones, that will flow through to recognition of the value that's clearly in our balance sheet. And then moving on to Sean, having mentioned balance sheet, Sean, perhaps a few slides on our financials.
Sure. Thanks, Neil. So if we just look at some of the key highlights from the financial year 2021, starting with the statement of comprehensive income, you can see here we made a loss before tax of 6.3 million, which was slightly below tax loss last year by around 200,000. And as last year, the biggest component of our costs is R&D, where we incurred costs of 3.7 million in 2021, which was down around 0.8 million on 2020, and that was really largely to do with our completing the XF73 phase 2b clinical study during 2021. And going forward, we'd expect R&D costs to start to increase reasonably significantly as we advance our 2 key lead programs, particularly M3, towards phase 3 studies. In terms of non-R&D costs, we saw a relatively small increase, around 400,000 in 21, and that really represents increased staff costs, having increased headcount to just around 21 employees now as a company. Important to note that general admin expenses, which is included in 2.3 million of non-R&D costs, remain flat on the prior year, and that really reflects our focus on minimising non-essential overheads and really focusing our spend on R&D. And then just finally, the share-based payment charge increased around 0.3 million during 2021 as well. So maybe if we move to the balance sheet. So balance sheet-wise, we saw a decrease in our net assets of around 5 million, which really represents the cash utilisation on operating activities during the year. Just picking out 1 or 2 items in the balance sheet, the intangible asset there of 2.3 million represents the upfront investment in M3, which we acquired in November 2020. There's been no further payments in regard to that, so hence why that has remained the same at the end of 21. In terms of receivables and prepayments, as in prior year, the largest element really is the R&D tax credit, which is around 0.9 million at the year end 21, and the R&D tax credit for 2020 of 1.1 we received in April 2021. And then really the sort of key item, cash and cash equivalents, 4.7 billion, so we had a reasonably strong cash position at the end of the year, having had net operating outflows of just over 5 million during 21. And as Neil mentioned at the outset, we had a successful fundraise post period end in March 22, raising 6.5 million, which obviously then further strengthened our balance sheet and gives us a cash runway to around mid-2023. So that was all really on the financials.
Okay, thank you, Sean. And obviously we take questions at the end, but I was going to now just to move on and talk through the pipeline, probably move through reasonably quickly because many of you would have heard this before, and it's obviously information is available on our website. But Talk about our lead asset, M3, NTCD-M3. The NT stands for non-toxigenic clostridial difficile. M3, that's the strain, is to prevent the recurrence of infections caused by toxic strains of C. difficile. And the data from the phase 2, this package we acquired the phase 2 data back in 2020. The data there was we believe game-changing, because this recurrence rate in the phase 2 when M3 was used was only 5% compared to 30% for placebo. So this data in terms of 5% recurrent rate means that 95 patients in that study who had M3 did not have recurrence, did not have any recurring infections. And this is the reason this is game-changing, is that other competitors in the space, be it fecal matter, sort of healthy feces, healthy poo extracts, they can only achieve rates maybe somewhere between 11 to 20, 25%. And indeed, sort of old antibiotics, of course, don't deliver very good reductions either. So if we can deliver rates of 5 to 10% in the phase 3, and obviously 5% repeat of phase 2 would be fantastic. We really have moved forward in the treatment options for C. difficile prevention of recurrence. Fantastic reductions in the recurrence rate, again, reducing those 500,000 infections and the deaths. So this is the target for the phase 3. It's built on very strong phase 2 data, which is class leading. This is a naturally occurring strain, so it exists in a small percentage of the population. So we're looking to harness that and introduce it to all patients who have had a C. diff infection to stop the recurrence rate. So it's harnessing the human microbiome. So it's a very safe, naturally occurring treatment, which was worked on before we acquired it, obviously, comes from the world-leading labs and medical research of Professor Dale Girding in Chicago. So a really targeted approach. It's a single strain approach, so it's not a consortia of bacteria. It's relatively straightforward in terms of manufacturing. We know exactly what we're giving to patients, and it looks to kick out that toxic strain, place it with our non-toxic M3, and of course the patient recovers and you don't have the recurrence of the infection. We can make it relatively cheaply. Doesn't have to be the most expensive treatment, and it's very stable as we're looking to target it as a solid dose, as a pill to be taken over 7 days with a glass of water, and your gut would be colonized with this naturally non-toxic M3 strain to give you that protection from and stop the recurrence of the toxic infections caused by toxic strains of C. diff. So a really interesting program, great phase 2 data, great science. And now what we've done since we owned the asset now, so we've owned it since really early December 2020, we've done a tech transfer of scaling up manufacturing, we're having regulatory discussions, we're finalising the detail of the phase 3 plans, and we've also done external market research, which is very positive both in the US and the EU. And really the other thing, of course, which is key for the news flow moving forward, we know is not only are we running currently an active partnering campaign for M3, but of course it's around closing a deal or deals to find that partner to help us with the phase 3s, but also to be the partner to commercialise the asset once those phase 3s finished. And we have, as we said before, we have good interest in that process, and obviously a key target for the company is to deliver that partner deal later this year. And as we said before, the phase 2 data was very strong. A well-run study in 173 patients, delivering this very strong recurrence rate, as it were, in terms of a very low rate of recurrence, say 5%, but also very good safety data and very easy to use treatment for the patients. As I said, a simple sort of oral dose, very easy to use to colonize the gut. And the phase 3 really is an extension of the phase 2. Obviously, there's the devil's in the detail, as always, in clinical designs, but we're building on the phase 2 and adding the key endpoints, including building evidence, of course, of patient days in hospitals and other sort of pharmacoeconomic factors that will help us with not only with the clinical data, but also the pharmacoeconomic story, the healthcare benefits of our treatment. Of course, it's not just a matter of stopping the infections. That hospitals and payers and governments, regulators want to see financial endpoints as well, to show that there really is a cost benefit to a medicine such as this, and we believe there is. And we're finalising those plans, and obviously with partnering and bringing the funding, and that study we'll look to start that around the end of this year, and really be actively recruiting patients in 2023. So very exciting late stage package, still stands alone, we believe, compared to any competition. There is some competition in this space. There's been some people have fallen away in the last 12 months, but a well-established market opportunity, especially in the US, and some of the competitors have some very, very high valuations, multi-hundred millions of dollars ascribed to their C. difficile programs, and M3, we believe, is better than any of the competition out there that's in development. So really excited about the potential here. Up to us now to close that partnering deal and keep momentum in this asset, moving it through to phase 3, which again, I remind you, for a UK biotech, a fantastic position to be in. Most of these assets, of course, fail in phase 1 and phase 2s. We have 2 assets that have gone successfully through phase 2 studies and heading towards phase 3. A real opportunity to deliver significant value. Feedback here from market research, independent market research done with experts in this space in the US and Europe, including payers, who control the purse strings. Very strong feedback, really liking the profile of M3. Obviously, it's up to us to deliver the phase 3 data to support this, but really enthusiastic report. This is obviously a very expert community. You understand the C. diff space very well, and really encouraging for us, both in terms of the feedback from expert clinicians, but also payers in terms of if we can deliver the profile in the phase 3 that we're showing in the phase 2, they can see the cost benefits and the clinical benefit, which means it will get approved, we hope, by regulators, but more importantly, perhaps once it's approved, it will get used as well. And the hospitals, there are accountants, pharmacists in the hospitals who will control what goes onto the formulary, and you have to show the evidence to get your treatments, your medicine approved, used in hospitals, stocked, and then, of course, ultimately tested by physicians using it, as with any new product, day to day. And we believe if we can deliver this profile, there will be a really good uptake of M3 in this marketplace. So again, very exciting to have this positive report, which was delivered, as it says, sort of last year in 2021. But adding to the package, of course, we share this with partners. They will do their own research, but it shows, again, not only is there a clinical opportunity, but a very clear commercial opportunity. And then moving forward to XS73. So XS73 has been the lead asset for Destiny Pharma for many years, until we acquired M3. XS73 is just behind M3. The reason it's behind is it only reported phase 2 data last year. And as we said earlier, we're still finalising the phase 3 plans for XS73. We will do that in the next few months. And then the data room for XS73 will effectively have caught up with M3. We'll have a full package to continue our partnering discussions here. But still a very exciting infection prevention approach. We have lost no enthusiasm or belief in XS73. We're just very fortunate to have M3 alongside X73. But the positioning is clear in terms of it's a very novel, patented, obviously, compound from our XF platform, shown over the years to be very rapidly bactericidal, so a very novel mechanism, kills bacteria very fast. And this speed of action means that the bacteria do not have a chance to adapt and morph and become superbugs to generate resistance. So it has the key benefit in this space of not generating resistance, addresses that global threat of antimicrobial resistance. And this is one of the attributes of the whole package as we move forward. But the real strength also in this is the fact it does what it says on the tin. It kills the bacteria very fast, very safely with a simple, safe nasal gel. And that's what you want to be doing before surgery. So as I said earlier, is killing these bacteria, the Staphylococcus aureus in the nose before surgery to stop them jumping into the wound and causing post-surgery infections, including MRSA. So very nasty infections that are relatively rare, but when they happen, very costly and can be very damaging to patients. And where we are with XS73, as we said, we're in discussions with regulators in the USA and Europe regarding phase 3 plans. Obviously, we're taking the phase 2 data, but importantly, looking at phase 3 designs, and there are some differences in approaches between the US and Europe. Could well be that we prioritise one of those territories, as it were, America or Europe, as the lead phase 3. But we'll see in those discussions that are going on in the next few months. But we're very excited about getting clarity there, because obviously that finishes that package in our data room for partnering. And we believe there's a very clearly a clinical opportunity, but also, as with M3, a very clear commercial opportunity. We also will continue to work on manufacturing, but commercialization and partnering, as with M3, is a key part of our strategy. Here we're targeting a deal in the first half of next year. So we're looking to focus on M3 this year, but XS73 will catch up very quickly. And again, it's very well positioned to deliver, to meet a clinical need, but deliver a very significant commercial opportunity. And the confidence we have in this was supported again by a European study. We've already done a US study a year or so ago in terms of, again, talking to experts in this space, hospitals and indeed payers. And the profile, the target product profile of XS73 in Europe in a recent report was only completed at the end of last year. Very positive feedback. The gold standard here, though it's not necessarily a gold standard, but the leading treatment across the world to decolonizing the nose is an old antibiotic called mupirocin. XS73 has clear advantages to mupirocin in terms of it only needs to be used in the 24 hours before surgery, not 5 days before. It's a non-irritant. It addresses the global threat of AMR. Mupirocin causes resistance. It's an old mechanism. But we believe there's clear advantages to XS73, and that was backed up by the feedback we had from this independent research talking to specialists in this space. Again, we need to deliver the phase 3 data to support this, but we're very encouraged by the feedback in Europe in terms of the potential for a market here. This builds on the fact we've already had very positive feedback from similar research in the US, where again, where there's no approved treatment for this nasal decolonization prior to surgery, where XS73 would be the first approved drug. And again, a very good feedback there for our target product profile. We can again price this sensibly. This will not be a high cost treatment. It needs to be sensibly priced because obviously hospital budgets are tight. But if we deliver the clinical profile, which means, as we showed in the phase 2 data, we are largely decolonizing patients prior to surgery. We can repeat that in phase 3, and the key endpoints are met in terms of less clinical infections or in Europe microbiological endpoints, then we will have a very strong package for approval, but then also more importantly, perhaps launch into this marketplace. And then our earlier programs, which we won't talk about too much, we have a government grant project in a partnership with Sporgen, targeting spore cough, and actually 2 dermal programs with XS73, which these are all preclinical, so they haven't yet gone into man. Spore cough is progressing well. So we won an Innovate UK grant back in 2020 of £800,000. That work is finishing in the next few months, and we will update on that, but it's gone well. And also some early interest in licensing discussions there. This would be a nasal spray, which could work alongside a set of vaccines to stimulate the immune system to present against coronavirus type infections, including COVID-19 and variants, but also influenza. So we believe this has still got, still interesting. It can be stockpiled. It'll be very low cost, stable, easy to use. But we'll report back more on that later this year. And then also our dermal programs. We have our own XS73 program, which is in partnership with an expert US group, NIAID, a government group, who are actually carrying out a significant proportion of the work. I can't call it a grant, but effectively they're paying for and carrying out the work. And that's continuing. And that was helped by the recent funding that we can now invest in some manufacturing to provide that to this US group, who will carry out more work in models of sort of wound infections. But these are serious wounds. So we talk about diabetic foot ulcers or leg ulcers, or possible military applications where wounds in, unfortunately, sort of the battlefield, or perhaps somebody damaging themselves in training, where deep wounds can get infections. Again, XS73 can work very fast, very safely to kill the bacteria that start colonizing these wounds and can cause obviously serious infections. So that's a project we're working on. But also last year, we were very excited that our China partner, China Medical Systems, with XS73 have started their own dermal program, which they're running and they're funding, which is looking at perhaps more superficial skin infections, maybe infections associated with eczema or atopic dermatitis. So this would be perhaps almost a sort of a pharmacy type product. So it'd be very interesting to see where that project goes. We have 2 different dermal programs running with XS73, and looking for that program to make progress this year and into 2023, and potentially be heading towards first human studies, maybe at the second half of 2023. But further updates to come on that program. But we have some depth in the pipeline with spore cough and these dermal programs, and indeed some earlier research collaborations. But the key focus, of course, is on those lead assets. And as we keep saying, the strong assets, both heading towards phase 3. Key milestones, obviously, coming forward, partnering for M3, clarifying the regulatory phase 3 journey for XS73, and that's exactly what the company's working on. Our model as a business is still, we're an R&D company, we're a virtual model, so the majority of the funds are spent on intellectual property generation and moving our assets through preclinical and clinical studies. and we believe we're on track to continue to build a very valuable infection prevention pipeline. So that's demonstrated, we believe, in the pipeline. Obviously, what we need to keep doing is to deliver progress and good news, work hard, including investor relations, and look to get that value recognised in the share price as a public company. Of course, that's that's out there all the time in terms of people can see our share price, our market capitalisation. We, of course, will keep running the business. We're not totally obsessed with the share price, but we believe we're significantly undervalued. But what we're looking to do is to deliver further milestones, and we believe the valuation will eventually follow. So I think that's the last slide. So if it's okay, end the presentation there, and I think we can move on to
Neil, Sean,
questions.
thank you very much indeed for your presentation this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just using the Q&A tab that's situated in the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while Neil and Sean take a few moments to review those questions submitted already, I would like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. Neil, Sean, as you can see, we've received a number of questions throughout today's presentation, and thank you to all investors for submitting their questions. If I could please ask you just to open up that Q&A tab, read out the questions and give your responses where it's appropriate to do so, and then I'll pick up from you at the end. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So I'll work through some of these questions. So there's a question regarding M3 being our lead asset, and yes, it is our lead asset. It's the most advanced because we have clarity on the phase 3 journey. And so if you can imagine, if you're looking to talk to partners, as we do, partners obviously want to see in a data room under confidentiality agreements, they want to see everything about your asset, from soup to nuts, from its manufacturing, its history, and also where you're heading with that asset, including in our case with our 2 lead assets. Of course, what are the phase 3 studies? What do they look like? How much will they cost? And M3, we have that clarity, so that's why the discussions are most advanced. And so M3 is our lead asset. XS73, though, is catching up behind. As I said, when we get that phase 3 clarity from the regulators over the next few months, we'll put that into the data room, and M3, XS73 will then be in a similar position to M3. So M3 is our lead asset, but XS73 is catching up, and we haven't lost any excitement about the potential of XS73. We're sort of very lucky to have 2 lead assets that we can talk about. The question here about Sporkov. We'll announce more. We have a partner here, so we obviously have to be careful what we say without agreeing with our partner. But the fact is, the asset is, as we've said, is going through and completing its grant work, and there may be potential for it to continue to be funded through grants, but also there could be opportunities, as we said, have some interest in sort of partnering and moving that forward. So further news to come on that this year. But yes, we're still very excited about the potential for Sporkov, and we believe its profile will fit very well across, either, as I said, alongside vaccines or in some cases instead of vaccines. But let's see when we get the final data sets. Not all of the work is finished yet, but it's fair to say that project has gone well, and there'll be more news on that later this year. There's a question here about perhaps some of the competitors in the C. diff space. And yes, there have been a couple of companies which have stumbled, which perhaps has reduced the competition in this space. And yes, I think it's fair to say one thing we will say, since we've acquired this asset in 2020, it's only got better. Of course, we're working hard on the manufacturing and phase 3 designs. So these are all very challenging tasks, but also we've seen some competitors fall by the wayside. And the data that some of the competitors have produced, none of it has questioned our positioning of M3 in the marketplace. We don't assume world domination, that we will be the only project, but we see still clearly advantages to M3. And in terms of vaccine approaches, well, there was a vaccine approach that failed recently. We don't think vaccines will be a solution to this problem of prevention of the initial infections, or indeed in our prevention of recurrence of C. difficile. So it's interesting that pharma companies have tried with their vaccine approaches, but they've had no success today. So we're very comfortable with the positioning of M3, and we watch and track our competitors, as you'd expect. So a question here about the type of licensing deals. I think it's fair to say that we're flexible in structures. Normally in these discussions, you start off with a fairly straightforward term sheet, and then it gets more complicated. It's the nature of biotech, pharma, negotiations, and we're open to a range of deal structures, from simple out licensing to to co-development. Obviously, we're looking ideally to find a partner who can obviously sell the drug into the market, but since we still have to do phase 3 studies, we're also open to a partner bringing their expertise and know-how to help us run the phase 3s and of course co-fund the phase 3. So some certain flexibility in what we're able to discuss. Obviously, the key thing for us is to find the right partner who can help us deliver the value for the program. But also, remember that value really becomes recognised when the product is sold and launched and used after the phase 3s, which obviously is 2 or 3, well, at least 3 years ahead of us from where we are now. So you have to take a long-term view on your partner and their qualities. There's a question here about the recent fundraising and disappointments, and I'm sure there's several comments here where shareholders are disappointed as doing a fundraising at a discount to that price. Definitely that was a matter that was considered by the board. Obviously, difficult biotech market. There's been a continuing sell-off from the US, which has come into the UK. There's actually been some, just talking to our colleagues at FinCap, there's been some, some news in the sector which has not been great in the year to date, which has not helped sentiment. But of course, unfortunately, we also had, unfortunately, terrible news, of course, of a very serious war in Ukraine. And as a biotech company that was sitting on a cash life to the end of this year, very difficult decision for the board to take. There was support from shareholders to strengthen the balance sheet, which was needed really to make us, put us in a strong position for some of the key tasks that we want to complete. But unfortunately, the price that was negotiated or was offered by shareholders was a discount, and the board took the view after consultation that it was wiser to take the money on offer with the real uncertainties for the year ahead, which is still there. Because without money, biotech is very difficult to operate. And yes, appreciate it was a tough decision, and I'm sure shareholders were not particularly impressed in some cases. But there was the opportunity to participate through the open offer, and we will look to deliver value. And these type of companies on AIM, you do get very sort of elastic share prices. It's a bit of a roller coaster. We've all been through it before, so I'm Sean, and we're confident we can deliver much higher value, which will be recognised in the share price in the future. There's a question about intellectual property. We're at Excess 73 protection. We have sort of triple layer protection. The IP protection runs into I think mid 2030s. Obviously, there's other things we're looking at to help protect across the portfolio our intellectual property. We don't have any particular concerns at the moment on the status of our IP, but definitely something that's tracked and looked at. As our Chief Scientific Officer and founder, Bill Love, something that he's monitored for many years, and we continue to look at ways of strengthening and indeed extending the IP where possible. In terms of when might M3 and Excess 73 reach the market, they both need to complete phase 3s. We're looking to have M3 actively recruiting next year. We think the recruitment period will be at least 2 years, so we talk perhaps about study finishing in 25. So potentially 2026, M3 could be on the market, depending on where we get to with the phase 3 studies for Excess 73 in the next few months with regulators. It could be that if again, subject to partnering and funding, that Excess 73 could be running in parallel to M3 by the end of 2023. So Excess 73 perhaps could be a little bit behind, but we'll see. It depends on the size of those studies, and of course, importantly, once the studies are up and running, the key thing, of course, is the rate of recruitment. How quickly can we recruit patients into those studies? So they obviously collect the data they need to collect and then complete. There's a question here about directors buying, which I assume is directors buying stock. Well, we participated, Sean and myself, chairman, one of our non-exec directors, participated again in the recent funding, and I'm sure at the right opportunity, other directors we may consider buying in the market at the right time when we're not in closed periods are allowed to, but let's see what happens there. But directors have put their hands in their pockets in the past and may well do in the future. I think that's all the questions that have appeared
Absolutely. Neil, Sean, thank you very much indeed for being so generous with your time and answering all of the questions that have come through from investors. And of course, if there are any further questions that do come through, we'll make them available to you immediately after the presentation is ended. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll publish all those responses where it's appropriate to do so on the Investor Meet Company platform. We'll notify you by email when these are ready for your review. Neil, Sean, perhaps for redirecting investors to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourselves and the company, could I please just ask you for a few closing comments to wrap up with? Thank you.
Yeah, just Neil, I'd just say thank you for attending the presentation. Again, this is a financial results, so looking back into 2021, the year to date, the company has made significant progress. It was fantastic to deliver such great phase 2 data from XS73. Seems to be forgotten now, but that was a excellent result, a 10 out of 10 study. Obviously, what we need to do now is to move forward and deliver partner deal on M3 and clarify that regulatory phase 3 story for XS73, and the company then will sort of come into the second half of this year and end the year in a really strong position, and behind that the earlier pipeline is bubbling away. So some clear tasks for us. We have a strengthened balance sheet, and we're very excited and committed to delivering those key milestones later this year. So please continue to follow us, and we will update the markets in due course.
Neil, Sean, that's great. Thank you very much indeed for taking the time to update investors this morning. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, and I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Destiny Pharma PLC, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session, so good morning to you all.